I promised myself I wouldn't cry on a train again. But the moment my grandson looked up at me with those steady, serious eyes and asked one small, innocent question, it was like the wheels beneath us rolled over a secret I'd buried for years. What came next? Well, you won't believe what happened. Stay with me because the strangest part is how a stranger named Hui, a quiet carriage, and a paper cup of coffee changed the way I think about love, aging, and second chances. Before I dive in, I love hearing where you're watching from. It helps me imagine you right here with me on this ride. Which city are you in tonight? Are you watching from Dallas, Boston, Phoenix, Chicago? Maybe a small town with one blinking stoplight and a diner that still serves pie by the slice. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. We were headed north that morning, me and my grandson Min. I'm Lon 68 this spring. A number that used to sound like a distant hill, and now feels like a sweater I wear without thinking. The train's home was a kind of heartbeat you could sit inside. The car smelled faintly of warm plastic and brewed coffee, with the ocean's cool breath sneaking through the seams when the doors slid open at each station. If you've ever watched the world pass by from a train, the trees flicking like pages, the houses stitched into a quilt, you know it makes your thoughts softer, memory-friendly, forgiving even. I had the window. Min curled at my side with his little backpack, the one with the rocket on it. His shoes didn't quite touch the floor, even when he pushed himself forward. And that always makes me a sheck in the best way. He's between sizes, between worlds. His mother, my daughter, needed me to bring him upstate for the weekend because her work schedule had become a scrambled egg of late shifts and early calls. I said yes. I almost always say yes. Across the aisle was a man I hadn't noticed at first because he was so still, the kind of quiet that makes other people feel braver without knowing why. He had a soft gray beard trimmed close to his jaw and hands that looked strong even while holding a book. He glanced up at Min's rocket backpack and grinned, and the lines at his eyes folded into kindness. Later I would come to know him as Hui, but in that moment he was just a polite stranger on a train, the kind we practice smiling at and then forget. Want me to lift it to the rack? He asked when I stood to shove my tote bag above us. His voice had what I call a wooden porch sound, warm, sturdy, made of summer evenings and stories told with the screen door creaking behind you. Only if it's no trouble, I said, measuring him the way women my age learn to measure men. Distance held, tone balanced, gratitude ready but not owed. Snot, he said, and he meant it. More than once in life, I've trusted the feel of a voice before the content of a sentence. He passed my tote up like it weighed nothing. I'm Hui. Lon, I said. He nodded, then returned to his book, a habit I appreciated. There is a kind of respect in not pressing further, in letting names sit together on the armrest like two coins set aside. Min pulled out his sketchpad and began drawing a train inside another train. A child's version of infinity. I watched his pencil make the world he liked best, where engines never tired, and there was always room to sit by the window. I live for those quiet minutes when a child becomes a builder, and no one interrupts. The conductor came through scanning tickets with a chirp that sounded like a bird who didn't want to be rude. You two traveling far? He asked when he saw Min's nose just above the seat back. Not too far, I said. Just enough to collect some stories. You've come to the right method, he said, tipping his cap. Trains are honest. They don't hurry. They arrive. I like that. Honest. Don't hurry. Arrive. I tucked it away for later. Somewhere after the river crossed under us like a long ribbon, Hui's book slipped from his lap and landed open at my feet. Without thinking, I picked it up and glanced at the page. A line about finding courage in the middle years. Middle years. I nearly laughed. Nobody tells you that the middle stretches. Sometimes it reaches right into your 70s and still calls itself middle if you've got questions left. Good line, I said, handing it back. Best on the page, he replied. Do you ever mark them? The lines you want to revisit all the time, I said, but I never write in the book. I'm a corner folder. Feels like a little handshake between me and the author. That make him laugh quietly. There's a particular joy in making a stranger laugh. It feels like you've been accepted into a small club. Min peered over at him. What's your book about? People who think they're finished learning, Hui said. And then life introduces them to a surprise teacher. Like a substitute? Min asked. Something like that. I sipped the coffee I'd picked up at the station, lukewarm and perfect because I didn't have to make it. The window gave me slices of towns, sun-faded billboards, ball fields, laundry hawked across porches. I felt the familiar tug of remembering my husband, Nom, gone 8 years now, and how we used to divide a train seat between us like a secret. I still wear my ring on a chain hidden beneath my blouse where I can press it when the world grows loud. I can talk about that much. We settled into a rhythm. Scenery, pencil scratches, book pages, the occasional station announcement. The air in the car was drowsy with routine. That's when Min leaned his head against my arm and asked, clear as the chime that comes before the conductor speaks, "Nana, are you ever going to be happy again?" It was so simple. Not "are you happy," which a person can dodge with a joke. Not "why are you sad," which puts you on trial. But "ever agone." The word again, reaching backward with a hand and forward with a lantern. I felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot politely asking to be untied. The train didn't slow, but everything inside me did. I heard the coffee cart clink down the aisle. I heard a baby a few rows back discover her own voice and sing to it. I heard my own breath stall and then begin again, stubborn as a small motor. I looked at Min's face, earnest, open, blessedly unaware of adult choreography, and I realized he wasn't accusing me. He was offering me the chance to tell him what I wanted from the rest of my life. You won't believe this next part because it's the kind of thing you think only happens in books. Huey, quiet, courteous Huey, closed his book and turned, not intruding, just making himself present like someone opening a door and waiting on the threshold for your invitation to speak. "May I say something?" he asked softly. To me, not to Min. That difference mattered. Consent is a small thing until it's not. Then it's the whole table that keeps the cups from falling. I nodded. "Please." "When my wife died," he said, voice steady, "everyone asked me when I'd be okay. The question was too big. It felt like I was supposed to schedule it. A friend gave me better words. He asked, 'What small happiness could you say yes to today?' He told me that if I kept saying yes to small things, one day I'd look up and realize I'd said yes to life again." Min listened as if Huey were reading a bedtime story he didn't want to end. I felt seen, not judged for the way I sometimes still cry while rinsing a teacup. Not pied for the way I wear the ring on a chain instead of on my finger. "Seeing what small happiness could you say yes to today?" Nana, Min asked, rolling the word happiness like a marble in his mouth. I thought of a dozen glamorous answers that didn't belong to me. Cruises, spas, outlandish plans I would never keep. Then I thought of doable things, honest things like the conductor had said. I could say yes to telling the truth. If I said I could say yes to not pretending I'm not tired when I'm tired. I could say yes to letting someone help me lift a heavy bag without feeling like I failed. Huey smiled at that just enough to move the corners of his eyes. Min took my hand and that small hand in mine felt like a bridge. And I cried. Not gasping, not breaking, just a warm spill that surprised me by how gentle it was. I've cried the hard way. That day, I cried the way you do when a locked door opens without squeaking. The woman across the aisle handed me a crisp napkin with a lemon printed in one corner. A kindness that arrived like a bell without a clapper. "Happens to us all," she murmured. And we were conspirators for a second. Older women on public transportation with complicated hearts and excellent balance. "Can we do with small happiness right now?" Min asked, the way children reach for the immediate. "We can," I said, and then I did something I hadn't planned when I woke that morning. I turned to Huey. "Would you share a coffee with us in the cafe car? The three of us? Only if you'd like, of course." He said yes, but he didn't leap at the offer. Didn't make it about himself. He stood and waited for me to gather what I needed, including my courage. I'll say this plainly because some of you will worried on my behalf. Nothing about him made me feel unsafe. There's a dignity some men carry that feels like the opposite of demand. He had it. The cafe car was a narrow hallway with a counter halfway down. The kind of place where you have to learn a new dance for passing one another. The server wore a badge that read Lynn and a smile that worked better than the espresso machine. We found a small table by the window, the laminate patterned like a memory of wood grain. Outside, a long field unrolled itself, yellowing at the edges where summer had loosened its grip. 3 hot chocolates, Min announced, negotiating on my behalf with a confidence inherited from somewhere. 1 for my Nana, 1 for me, and 1 for our new friend. "Make mine a coffee," I said, laughing. "But you can have the extra whipped cream I'd normally say no to." "Deal," Min said and looked at Huey, waiting for him to choose. "Coffee's fine," Huey told Lynn. Black, but I'll take the company sweet. The drinks arrived, and with them that easy kind of conversation you can only have with people you may never see again, or with people you hope to know very well. Strangely is the same openness either way. We talked about everyday things. Min's fascination with planets. My stubborn hydrangea that refuses to bloom blue no matter what I feed it. Hui's habit of fixing old radios because he likes the way they sound like memories. Somewhere in there, Min made a confession of his own. I asked Nana that question because she sings in the kitchen when she's happy. He said, I miss the singing. I put my hand over my heart because it seemed like the only decent thing to do when someone tells you what they miss about you. Hui looked at me then, not away, and said, What song? The first tune that popped into my head was the one Nam used to hum when we were loading the dishwasher together. That ordinary ballade of dishes and door squeaks and elbow nudges. I hummed a line, not loud, just enough to put a little music into the air between us. Min's face brightened like someone had cracked a new window open. Again he said, and I did. Right there in the cafe car, over the rattle of cups and the soft slap of the tracks, I hummed the dishwasher song. Nobody turned to stare. A man at the far end tapped his finger to the beat. Lin wiped the counter with more rhythm than necessary. It was small, this happiness, but it felt like putting my palm against the engine of a life and feeling it warm up. Back at our seats, Hui helped settle my tote without being asked. Thank you, I said, letting the words be complete and not a pre-appy for existing. We exchanged numbers, not an obligation, not a flirtation pressed thin. Just a promise that if conversation wanted to continue later, it could. I wrote Hui Train in my phone because sometimes you need the origin story right there next to the name. As the city rose ahead of us, brick shouldering up against glass, a skyline that always looks like somebody's hopeful graph, Min leaned in again. Nana, he whispered, I have another question. Go ahead, I said, ready this time. If Mr. Hui is a small happiness, can we keep him? Children, do not negotiate with subtext. I smiled because my heart had already tried to ask the same question in a more cautious dialect. I looked at Hui. He had heard. Of course he had. He pretended to be very interested in the safety card in the seat pocket, the way a gentleman gives you time. We can keep the memory of today, I told Min, brushing hair from his forehead. And we can see what tomorrow wants to share with us. That's how we keep people honestly and kindly. Hui glanced up, and our eyes met for a second that felt longer than the click between rails. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply agreeing to be possible. At my age, this middle that keeps stretching. Possibility is a gift you open slowly. The train slowed. The conductor's voice returned, and we all swayed a little as if we had learned the same dance. People stood and reached for bags. The lemon napkin woman kept at me. Lin leaned into the doorway of our car to wish everyone a good afternoon, her smile traveling farther than her feet could. When we stepped onto the platform, the day smelled like rain waiting for its cue. Min slipped his hand into mine, and then boldly reached for Hui's too, creating a small chain of human intention. We walked like that for a few steps, 3 across, before Min let go to cross the yellow line with a leap only a 9-year-old can manage. Lawn, Hui said, pausing where the crab thinned. He didn't fill the pause with anything unnecessary. If you'd ever like company on your next northbound lesson, I'm available. Only if it feels right. I'll let the day tell me, I said, liking my own answer. At the exit we separated. Min waved with both arms like he was launching a boat. I felt lighter than when we had boarded, but not in the way of losing something. More like I'd set down a heavy coat I didn't need anymore, and found I could still keep warm. People flowed around us, each carrying their secret cargo. Grief, hope, shopping bags, deadlines, while the station's clock kept time for all of us without picking favorites. On the escalator up to the street, Min leaned against me and whispered, "Na, you sang today." I did, I said, and smiled because it was true. Because sometimes the smallest yes is the door you've been searching for with your hands in the dark. If you're watching from one of those cities you mentioned earlier, or from a place so tiny it barely makes a dot on the map, I want you to know this. Our lives don't end the day we think they're supposed to. They circle back with new teachers, grandchildren who ask gentle questions, strangers who wait at thresholds, conductors who remind us not to hurry. And sometimes on a perfectly ordinary train, you find yourself saying yes to the next part of your life. One hum, one sip, one honest sentence at a time. Tell me your city. Tell me the small happiness you could say yes to today. And I'll meet you there in the comments, in the kitchen, in the quiet car where hope learns the timetable again. Next stop. We'll find out together. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was dripping in through the curtains of my daughter's guest room, laying soft stripes across the quilt. Min was still asleep, curled like a comma on the fold-out bed, his hair a wild halo. For a moment I just watched him breathe, the rise and fall of his chest reminding me of the train's rhythm the day before. That innocent question of his, "Are you ever going to be happy again?" had settled into my bones overnight, not as a wound, but as a lantern still glowing. I tipped him to the kitchen and set water on for tea. I thought of Hui. The way he had asked permission to speak before sharing his story, the steadiness in his voice when he said happiness could be built one small yes at a time. I pressed my ring beneath my blouse, feeling the chain warm against my skin. It wasn't betrayal to remember someone new. It was proof that Nam had given me a heart big enough to keep beating even after he left. Later, Min patted in, rubbing his eyes. "Nana, did you sleep?" he asked. "I did," I said. "Better than I have in a while." He grinned, pleased with himself, as if my rest had been his accomplishment. We spent the morning playing cards on the kitchen table, laughter echoing through the house. Still, my mind kept flicking back to the train, to Hui's kind eyes. I had his number now, but it felt like holding a seashell. You press it to your ear, wondering if it really does contain the ocean. By midday, Min asked if we could go into town for ice cream. We bundled up and took the bus, which smelled faintly of diesel and school books. At the corner creary, I ordered pistachio because Nam always had and Min chose bubblegum swirl, his tongue turning blue almost instantly. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from a number saved simply as Hui Train. It was polite, careful Lon. "I hope I'm not intruding. Thank you for the conversation yesterday. If you ever feel like continuing it, I'd be glad. No pressure." I stared at the words, my heart doing that ridiculous thing it hadn't done since my 40s, skipping ahead like a teenager on a sidewalk. Min leaned over. "Who is it?" "A friend from the train," I said. "The happiness man." "Yes," I said softly. That evening, after Min was tucked in, I stood by the window with my tea cooling in my hand. I typed back, "Hui, thank you. Felt good to talk. Perhaps a walk sometime." And almost immediately the reply came, "Yes, whenever you ready." The following afternoon we met at the park near the river. I wore a scarf Nam had once given me, its edges frayed but comforting. Hui stood waiting near the benches, holding 2 cups from the coffee stand. He handed one to me, the steam rising between us like a gentle introduction all over again. We walked slowly past children chasing pigeons and couples sharing sandwiches on the grass. He told me about his radios, how he loved coaxing forgotten voices out of old machines. I told him about my garden, how stubborn my hydrangea remained despite my coaxing. And in that ordinary exchange I felt something begin. Small, yes, but alive. At one point Hui paused. "Lon, I don't want to assume anything, but yesterday when your grandson asked if you'd ever be happy again, you didn't look afraid of the question. You looked ready to answer." I took a long breath, watching the water curl with the breeze. "I think I am ready," I said. "Maybe not all at once, but ready to start." We sat on a bench, our shoulders not quite touching, letting the silence do some of the talking. The sun dipped lower, painting the river in gold. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like a woman waiting for her life to end. I felt like a woman about to begin something new. When I returned home, Min was waiting at the door. "Did you sing today, Nana?" he asked, the same way he used to ask if I'd remembered to bring him candy. "Yes," I said, smiling as I set my coat aside. I think I did, and in his eyes I saw it, the quiet approval of a child who had unknowingly become my teacher. Happiness wasn't something I had to chase. It was something I could choose. One yes at a time. One walk, one conversation. One song hummed softly in a cafe car. So if you're watching from your city, whether it's New York or Kansas City or a place so small it barely makes the weather map, let me tell you this. If someone asks you whether you'll ever be happy again, don't be afraid of the question. Let it open you. Let it take you onto a train, into a park, beside a stranger who becomes a friend. Because sometimes the answer begins the moment you dare to hum again. And maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to keep the music.